Hey everyone, tonight we're exploring one of history's most elegant puzzles, how an empire spanning thousands of miles managed complex economics through nothing but knotted strings. Before we settle in, take a moment to like this if you enjoy these quiet historical journeys, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love how a global community comes together to explore these fascinating questions. Now get comfortable, dim those lights. Tonight, we're not chasing conquest stories or imperial drama. Instead, we're going to examine something much more subtle, but equally remarkable: the sophisticated resource management systems of the Inca Empire, centered around the mysterious Quipu records. Let's begin our gentle journey into the world of knotted mathematics and mountain administration. Picture, if you will, a stone chamber high in the Andes, where candlelight flickers across bundles of colored cords hanging from wooden frames. Here, a Quipu keeper runs practiced fingers along strings of alpaca wool, reading notes like braille, each twist and turn encoding precious information about harvests, labor obligations, and storage inventories. This is our entry point into understanding how the largest empire in pre-Columbian America managed millions of subjects without a single written word. Tonight, we'll explore the contemplative world of the KH, the Quipu keepers, whose patient mathematical duties formed the nervous system of imperial administration. We'll discover how kinship networks called LLU provided the foundation for economic organization, how agricultural terraces carved into mountainsides represented systematic resource management, and how storage facilities called QLLQA ensured food security across diverse climates. We'll examine the gentle efficiency of the Mita labor system, where seasonal work cycles balance community needs with imperial projects, and follow the Chaw's key messengers who carried knotted records along mountain paths, maintaining communication across impossible distances. Through it all, we'll contemplate the profound paradox of complexity without writing how actual knowledge systems managed resources with an elegance that continues to inspire modern organizational theory. In the quiet stone chambers of ancient Cusco, where candlelight flickered against walls of precisely fitted granite, administrators of the Inca Empire engaged in a practice that would seem almost mystical to modern observers. With fingers moving gently along colored cords, they read the encoded mathematics of an empire that stretched from the cloud forests of Ecuador to the desert coasts of Chile. These were the KHI, the Quipu keepers, whose patient work with knotted strings formed the nervous system of one of history's most sophisticated administrative networks. The Quipu itself presents a gentle paradox that invites contemplation. Here was a civilization that managed millions of subjects, coordinated vast construction projects, and maintained detailed economic records without a single written word. Instead, they relied on the tactile wisdom of three-dimensional information storage, where knowledge lived not on flat surfaces, but in the subtle variations of knots, colors, and chord positions. Each Quipu resembled a textile constellation, with a main chord supporting numerous pendant strings that cascaded downward like a carefully organized waterfall of information. The mathematical foundation of this system reveals the profound sophistication of Andean thought. The Inca employed a decimal system, with knots positioned to represent units, tens, hundreds, and thousands in ascending order along each chord. Simple knots indicated single digits, while figure-eight knots and other variations provided additional numerical values. The absence of knots in a particular position represented zero, demonstrating an understanding of this crucial mathematical concept that developed independently in the Andes. This numerical precision allowed administrators to track everything from tribute obligations to storage inventories with remarkable accuracy. Yet the Quipu transcended mere accounting. The colors of the chords carried meaning as profound as the knots themselves. Deep crimson might represent the blood of sacrifice or the sacred nature of certain obligations. Golden yellow could indicate the sun's blessing on agricultural production or the precious metals flowing through imperial networks. Earth tones spoke of the fundamental connection between human organization and the natural world that sustained it. Each regional variation in color symbolism reflected local traditions that the Inca administration wisely preserved while integrating them into imperial standards. The training of Quipu keepers represented one of the most contemplative aspects of Inca society. Young candidates underwent years of instruction, learning not merely the technical aspects of knot-making and reading, but absorbing the deeper philosophical principles that governed imperial administration. They studied the sacred nature of reciprocity, the Ainai principle, that bound communities together through mutual obligation. They learned to see mathematical relationships not as abstract concepts but as reflections of cosmic harmony, where the precise balance of tribute and redistribution maintained social equilibrium. Archaeological evidence suggests that the tradition of knotted records extended far beyond the Inca period, with roots reaching back to the war, ice civilization and other Andean cultures that flourished between 600 and 1000 CE. These earlier systems appear to have been simpler, focusing primarily on numerical record keeping for local communities. The Inca genius lay in standardizing and expanding these traditions, creating protocols that allowed information to flow seamlessly across vast distances and diverse cultural groups. The spiritual dimension of Quipu work cannot be overlooked. In Andean worldview, the act of creating and reading these records connected the administrator to the fundamental forces that govern human society. The careful placement of each knot required not only technical skill, but a meditative attention to the sacred responsibilities of resource management. The Quipu keeper served as an intermediary between the material needs of the community and the cosmic principles that ensured prosperity and harmony. Modern scholars continue to debate the full extent of Quipu capabilities. While the numerical aspects have been largely decoded, evidence suggests that some Quipu may have recorded narrative information, perhaps even historical accounts or ceremonial instructions. The tragic loss of Quipu reading knowledge following the Spanish conquest represents one of history's great intellectual catastrophes, leaving hundreds of surviving Quipu as silent witnesses to a sophisticated information system we can only partially understand. The contemplative nature of this work extended to the physical environment where Quipu keepers labored. Stone chambers designed for record storage maintained the cool, dry conditions necessary for preserving the delicate chords. The gentle light of oil lamps created an atmosphere conducive to the careful concentration required for accurate record interpretation. In these peaceful spaces, the mathematical poetry of imperial administration unfolded through the patient work of human hands, reading the encoded wisdom of knotted strings. The foundation of the Inca Empire's remarkable resource management system rested not in grand palaces or imposing fortifications, but in the quiet rhythms of kinship networks that had governed Andean life for countless generations. The ALLU, a complex web of family relationships and reciprocal obligations, formed the bedrock upon which imperial administrators would build their sophisticated Quipu-based accounting systems. To understand how millions of people across diverse mountain landscapes could be organized without written language, one must first appreciate the gentle but profound logic of these kinship-based economic structures. In the pre-dawn hours of highland communities, as mist still clung to the terraced mountainsides, the principles of Ainai reciprocal labor exchange would quietly orchestrate the day's activities. Extended families bound together by both blood and marriage ties stretching back generations would gather in the central plaza of their settlement. The soft murmur of Quechua voices discussing the day's work requirements created a peaceful counterpoint to the distant sound of llamas stirring in their corrals. These were not mere social gatherings, but sophisticated economic planning sessions where the allocation of human resources was determined through consensus and traditional obligation. The ALLU system represented a profound understanding of how human societies could organize themselves around mutual aid rather than individual accumulation. Each family unit within the kinship network maintained detailed mental records of services given and received, creating an intricate web of obligations that ensured no household would face hardship alone. When a family needed to build a new home, repair irrigation channels, or they could call upon their ALLU network for assistance, knowing that they would reciprocate when others faced similar needs. This system of balanced reciprocity created a form of social security that required no external enforcement. It was maintained through the gentle but persistent pressure of community expectation and kinship loyalty. The seasonal nature of Andean agriculture provided a natural rhythm for these reciprocal exchanges. During the planting season, when every available hand was needed to prepare the terraced fields, families would pool their labor resources according to carefully maintained traditions. The sight of dozens of community members working together across the stepped mountainsides, their colorful clothing creating patterns against the brown earth, embodied the practical beauty of collective economic organization. These were not abstract principles but lived realities that governed daily life with the reliability of the seasons themselves. As the Inca Empire expanded across the Andes, imperial administrators faced the delicate challenge of incorporating these local kinship systems into their larger organizational framework. Rather than replacing the ALLU structure, they chose to build upon it, creating a nested hierarchy where local reciprocal obligations formed the foundation for imperial tribute systems. The Curaçaos, traditional leaders who emerged from within the kinship networks, became crucial intermediaries who could translate between the intimate scale of family obligations and the vast requirements of imperial administration. The genius of this integration lay in its respect for existing social relationships while gradually expanding their scope. A family's obligation to provide labor for community projects could be extended to include service on imperial road construction or agricultural terracing projects. The familiar rhythm of seasonal work continued, but now it might include periods of service to the broader imperial system. The Quipu keepers who recorded these obligations understood that they were not merely tracking abstract numbers, but managing a complex web of human relationships that stretched from individual households to the imperial capital at Cusco. This transformation of local reciprocity into imperial organization required extraordinary sensitivity to cultural variation across the diverse populations of the Andes. Mountain communities that had developed their own specific traditions of labor exchange and resource sharing needed to be integrated into the imperial system without destroying the social cohesion that made their economies function. The patient work of imperial administrators sitting in stone chambers lit by flickering oil lamps as they adjusted their Quipu records to account for regional differences represented a form of economic management that prioritized social stability over administrative efficiency. The ALLU system's emphasis on collective responsibility also provided a foundation for the empire's approach to risk management and resource distribution. When crop failures or natural disasters affected particular communities, the broader kinship network would automatically mobilize to provide assistance. This principle of mutual aid, scaled up through the imperial administrative system, created a form of economic insurance that could respond to crises across vast geographical distances. The Quipu records that tracked these resource flows were not merely accounting tools but instruments of social solidarity, ensuring that abundance in one region could compensate for scarcity in another. The contemplative nature of this economic organization reflected deeper Andean philosophical principles about the relationship between human communities and their environments. The ALLU system embodied an understanding that economic activity should strengthen rather than strain social relationships. that individual prosperity was meaningless without collective well-being. These principles would profoundly influence how the Inca Empire approached questions of resource allocation, labor organization, and administrative control, creating a unique form of economic management that prioritized social harmony alongside material productivity. The morning mist clings to the steep mountainsides as we contemplate one of humanity's most remarkable achievements in agricultural engineering, the vast networks of anines, or agricultural terraces, that transformed the vertical landscape of the Andes into productive farmland. These stone-walled terraces, ascending like gentle steps toward the sky, represent far more than mere farming infrastructure. They embody a sophisticated understanding of what scholars now call the vertical economy, a system that maximized the diverse ecological zones of mountain environments to create unprecedented agricultural abundance. In the pre-dawn hours, when the air is crisp and still, one can almost sense the quiet wisdom embedded in these ancient agricultural systems. The Inca administrators, working with their Quipu records spread before them, understood that managing an empire spanning from coastal deserts to high-altitude plateaus required a fundamentally different approach to resource management than the horizontal agricultural systems of lowland civilizations. Their solution was to embrace the mountain's natural diversity, creating a vertical archipelago of specialized production zones that could supply everything from tropical fruits to high-altitude birds within a single administrative region. The construction of these terraces reveals the patient, methodical approach that characterized Inca resource management. Archaeological evidence suggests that the expansion of terraced agriculture under imperial rule built upon centuries of local innovation, with communities gradually developing techniques for soil retention, water management, and crop rotation that would later be standardized across the empire. The process was never hurried. Teams of workers would spend months carefully constructing the stone-retaining walls, layering different types of soil and gravel to ensure proper drainage, and installing the intricate irrigation channels that would carry mountain water to each level with mathematical precision. The gentle sound of water flowing through these stone channels creates a peaceful soundtrack to our exploration of this vertical economy. The Inca engineers understood that water management was perhaps the most critical aspect of mountain agriculture, and their irrigation systems demonstrate a sophisticated grasp of hydraulic principles. Springs were carefully identified and protected, with sacred status often accorded to water sources that fed the agricultural terraces. The flow was controlled through a network of stone channels, wooden gates, and carefully calculated gradients that could distribute water evenly across vast expanses of terraced land. What makes this system particularly fascinating from an economic perspective is how it integrated with the broader imperial administration. Quipu keepers maintained detailed records of which crops were planted in which zones, tracking the productivity of different terrace levels and coordinating planting schedules across multiple ecological zones. The vertical nature of Andean agriculture meant that a single valley could produce tropical crops like cocoa and fruits in its lower reaches, maize and quinoa in the middle elevations, and potatoes and other hardy tubers in the higher zones. This diversity provided both food security and the raw materials for the complex tribute and redistribution systems that held the empire together. The terraced landscapes also served as living laboratories for agricultural experimentation. Spanish colonial observers were amazed to discover that the Inca had developed hundreds of varieties of potatoes, each adapted to specific microclimates and elevation zones. The systematic approach to crop development involved careful observation of plant performance across different terrace levels, with successful varieties being propagated through seed banks maintained at administrative centers. This patient process of agricultural innovation, recorded in Quipu notes and maintained through oral tradition, created a genetic diversity that modern scientists recognize as invaluable for global food security. The seasonal rhythms of terrace agriculture created a contemplative pattern of work that integrated seamlessly with the social organization of Inca society. The timing of planting and harvest varied dramatically across different elevation zones, allowing communities to stagger their agricultural activities and provide labor for other zones when their own fields were dormant. This natural coordination reduced the pressure on any single community, while ensuring that the empire's agricultural needs were met through a peaceful rotation of collective effort. The morning light gradually illuminates the stone walls of these ancient terraces, revealing the careful craftsmanship that has allowed many of them to survive for centuries. The builders understood that successful mountain agriculture required infrastructure that could withstand both the gradual pressure of soil and water and the occasional seismic activity that characterizes the Andean region. Their solution was to create flexible stone walls that could shift slightly without collapsing, using techniques that modern engineers study for insights into sustainable construction in challenging environments. As we consider the broader implications of this vertical economy, we begin to understand how the Inca achieved something that many modern societies struggle with: the creation of truly sustainable agricultural systems that enhanced rather than degraded their environment. The terraces prevented soil erosion, conserved water, and actually improved the fertility of steep mountain slopes that would otherwise be unsuitable for cultivation. This approach to resource management, carefully documented in Quipu records and maintained through generations of accumulated knowledge, offers profound lessons for contemporary efforts to develop sustainable agricultural practices in challenging environments. The QOLQA system emerged from the mountain landscape like a natural extension of the Andean peaks themselves, stone chambers carved into hillsides and built along valley floors, creating a vast network of storage facilities that would become the backbone of imperial food security. These weren't merely warehouses in the modern sense, but carefully engineered repositories that reflected centuries of accumulated wisdom about preservation, distribution, and the delicate balance between abundance and scarcity that govern life in the high mountains. Walking through the ruins of these storage complexes today, one can still sense the quiet efficiency that once characterized their operation. The chambers were constructed with remarkable precision, their stone walls fitted together without mortar, creating naturally ventilated spaces that maintained consistent temperatures year-round. The builders understood that different foods required different storage conditions. Quinoa needed dry, cool spaces, while potatoes required specific humidity levels to prevent sprouting or decay. Quinoa, the freeze-dried potatoes that could last for years, found its home in the driest chambers, while fresh produce awaited distribution in areas with controlled airflow. The strategic placement of these storage centers revealed the sophisticated thinking behind imperial resource management. They weren't randomly scattered across the landscape, but positioned at carefully calculated intervals along the great road networks, ensuring that no community was more than a day's journey from emergency supplies. Mountain passes, valley confluences, and administrative centers all became nodes in this storage network, creating redundancy that could withstand local disasters while maintaining the flow of resources across vast distances. Archaeological evidence suggests that the largest QOLQA complexes could store enough food to feed thousands of people for months, perhaps even years. At Ollantaytambo, researchers have identified storage chambers that once held an estimated 40,000 tons of agricultural products, while the complex at Pisac contained hundreds of individual storage units arranged in terraced rows that followed the natural contours of the mountainside. The Spanish chroniclers arriving in the 16th century marveled at the scale and organization of these facilities, describing warehouses that stretched for miles and contained provisions that seemed inexhaustible. The preservation techniques employed in these storage systems reflected deep understanding of Andean environmental conditions. The builders knew that the thin mountain air, intense ultraviolet radiation, and dramatic temperature fluctuations between day and night could be harnessed for food preservation. They created chambers with specific orientations to catch morning sun while avoiding the harsh afternoon heat, and designed ventilation systems that took advantage of natural air currents flowing through mountain valleys. Within these stone chambers, administrators maintained meticulous inventories using Quipu records that tracked not only quantities but also the age and condition of stored goods. The rotation system ensured that older supplies were distributed first, while fresh harvests replenished the stores in endless cycles that matched the rhythm of agricultural seasons. This wasn't merely bureaucratic efficiency, but a sacred responsibility, as the storage keepers understood that their careful attention to detail meant the difference between community survival and catastrophe. The integration of storage systems with transportation networks created a logistics capability that impressed even the Spanish conquistadors who had experience with European supply chains. Goods could move from storage to distribution points with remarkable speed, supported by the Chazki messenger system at coordinated deliveries and tracked inventory levels across hundreds of miles of mountain terrain. When communities faced crop failures or natural disasters, the QOLQA system could respond within days, redistributing resources from areas of abundance to regions of need. The social dimensions of storage management reflected the broader principles of reciprocity that governed Inca society. Communities contributed to the storage system through their agricultural surplus and labor obligations, but they also knew that these same stores would support them during difficult times. The storage keepers, often drawn from local communities, understood both the technical requirements of preservation and the social obligations that made the system function. Their work carried spiritual significance, as they were guardians of community survival and continuity. Modern food security experts studying these ancient systems have identified principles that remain relevant today. The emphasis on local storage, diversified preservation techniques, and community-based management created resilience that industrial food systems often lacked. The QOLLQA network demonstrated that food security wasn't just about production, but about the careful management of surpluses, the anticipation of shortages, and the social systems that ensured equitable distribution during times of crisis. The MITA system represented perhaps the most sophisticated expression of organized labor in the pre-Columbian Americas, a gentle revolution in human cooperation that transformed the seasonal rhythms of Andean life into the steady heartbeat of imperial construction. In the quiet hours before dawn, across thousands of mountain communities, men would gather their simple tools and prepare for journeys that might take them hundreds of miles from home. Yet they departed not as conscripts, but as participants in a sacred cycle of reciprocal obligation that had governed their ancestors for generations. The word Maitu itself carried profound meaning in Quechua, suggesting not merely work, but a turn, a rotation, a natural cycle like the seasons themselves. This was labor understood as part of the cosmic order, where individual effort contributed to collective prosperity in ways that transcended simple economic calculation. The Spanish chroniclers, observing this system with mixture of admiration and incompression Aaron, noted how workers approached their obligations with a dignity and purpose that seemed to emanate from deep cultural understanding rather than external compulsion. In the terraced valleys surrounding Cusco, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of the careful planning that preceded each MITA cycle. Stone platforms where administrators would gather, consulting their Quipu records to determine which communities owed service, which projects required attention, and how the seasonal availability of labor could be harmonized with agricultural demands. The Quipu keepers worked closely with local Curacaas, those hereditary leaders who served as bridges between imperial administration and community tradition, ensuring that MITA obligations complemented rather than disrupted the essential work of planting and harvest. The genius of the MITA system lay in its integration with the natural rhythms of Andean life. During the dry season, when agricultural work diminished, communities would send their quota of workers to construct roads that carved graceful paths through seemingly impossible mountain terrain. These weren't merely utilitarian projects, but expressions of collective artistry, where each stone was placed with consideration for both structural integrity and aesthetic harmony. The workers understood themselves as participating in the creation of something that would serve their descendants for generations, a perspective that infused their labor with profound meaning. Archaeological evidence from sites like Ollantaytambo reveals the extraordinary sophistication of Maita organization. Here, massive stones weighing several tons were transported across valleys and up mountainsides using techniques that required not only engineering knowledge, but also precise coordination of human effort. The workers developed systems of ropes and levers, ramps and rollers, that allowed them to move these enormous blocks with almost meditative patience. Spanish observers noted how the work proceeded without apparent haste or stress, guided by experienced foremen who had learned their craft through years of participation in similar projects. The Maita workers lived in temporary settlements near their work sites, communities that archaeologists describe as remarkably well organized and comfortable. These weren't harsh labor camps, but carefully planned villages where workers maintained their family relationships and cultural practices while contributing to imperial projects. The state provided food from the QOLLQ-based storage systems, clothing from textile workshops, and tools crafted by specialized artisans. This support system meant that Maita service, while demanding, didn't impoverish the participating communities, but rather integrated them more fully into the imperial economy. Regional variations in Maita organization reflected the system's flexibility and responsiveness to local conditions. In the coastal regions, workers might be assigned to irrigation projects that expanded agricultural productivity in desert environments. In the high mountains, they constructed the remarkable storage facilities that dotted the landscape like stone beehives, each one precisely positioned to take advantage of natural temperature and humidity conditions. Forest communities contributed their specialized knowledge to bridge construction, creating the suspended walkways that allowed imperial roads to cross seemingly impassable gorges. The Spanish colonial transformation of Maita into forced labor for mining operations represents one of history's most tragic perversions of indigenous institutions. Where the Inca system had balanced community needs with imperial projects, maintaining the essential reciprocity that gave the system its moral foundation, colonial administrators stripped away these protective elements and imposed brutal demands that devastated indigenous populations. The contrast illuminates the sophisticated ethical framework that had governed pre-Columbian labor organization, a framework that modern societies might study with profit. Contemporary indigenous communities in the Andes maintain echoes of Maita principles in their collective work projects, though the scale and scope have necessarily diminished. Anthropologists document how communities still organize communal labor for infrastructure projects, maintaining roads, constructing schools, or building irrigation systems through voluntary participation that reflects ancient patterns of reciprocal obligation. These modern expressions of Maita demonstrate the enduring relevance of organizational principles that prioritize community welfare over individual accumulation. The Maita system's integration with Quipu record-keeping created a feedback loop that allowed for continuous refinement and adaptation. Administrators could track which communities had fulfilled their obligations, which projects had been completed successfully, and how labor allocation might be improved in future cycles. This information flowed through the Char's key messenger networks, creating a dynamic system that could respond to changing conditions while maintaining its essential character as an expression of collective responsibility and mutual aid. In the high mountain passes where condors roamed, the thermal currents on ancient paths wound scapes of impossible beauty, a different kind of network pulsed with quiet efficiency. The Chazki runners, those remarkable messengers of the Inca Empire, moved like whispered secrets across the Andean spine, carrying not just messages, but the very lifeblood of imperial Kuwaitine. Their feet, hardened by years of mountain training, touched stone paths that connected distant provinces in a web of communication that would have impressed even modern administrators. The Chazki system represented perhaps the most elegant solution to the challenge of governing a mountain empire that stretched from the equatorial forests of Ecuador to the wine valleys of Chile. These professional runners, selected for their endurance and reliability, maintained a communication network that could carry urgent messages across the empire in a matter of days rather than weeks. The gentle rhythm of their relay system, with runners positioned at carefully calculated intervals, created a human telegraph that transmitted everything from military intelligence to administrative queries with remarkable speed and accuracy. Each Chazki station, or tambo, nestled into the landscape like a natural extension of the mountain itself. These way stations, constructed from the same fitted stones that characterized Inca architecture, provided shelter and sustenance to the runners while serving as crucial nodes in the imperial communication network. The archaeological remains of these stations, scattered across the Andean landscape like prayer beads on an ancient rosary, reveal the thoughtful planning that went into their placement. They were positioned not just for optimal running distances, but also to take advantage of natural shelter, water sources, and strategic viewpoints that allowed runners to spot approaching colleagues from distant peaks. The runners themselves embodied a unique synthesis of physical prowess and administrative responsibility. Selected from highland communities where the thin air and steep terrain naturally developed extraordinary cardiovascular capacity, these men underwent rigorous training that prepared them not just for the physical demands of mountain running, but for the sacred responsibility of carrying imperial information. They learned to read the subtle signs of weather patterns that could affect their journeys, to navigate by stars and landmarks when mist obscured familiar paths, and to maintain the careful protocols that ensured message integrity across the vast distances of the empire. The integration of the Chazki network with the Quipu record-keeping system created a sophisticated information management infrastructure that modern organizations might envy. Runners carried not just verbal messages but also Quipu bundles containing complex administrative data that required careful handling and precise delivery. The sight of a Chazki runner approaching a tambo, his breath visible in the thin mountain air, a carefully wrapped Quipu bundle secured against his chest, represented a moment of connection between distant parts of the empire. The receiving runner would study the knots briefly, confirming the message's integrity before setting off on the next leg of the journey, his footsteps carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of imperial administrators. The speed of this human communication network astonished Spanish conquistadors who found that news of their movements often preceded them to distant provinces. What they witnessed was the culmination of centuries of development in mountain communication systems, refined through generations of practical experience and cultural innovation. The Chazki could carry messages from Cusco to Quito in less than a week, a feat that required not just individual endurance, but systematic coordination across hundreds of relay stations and thousands of trained personnel. The training of Chazki runners reflected the Inca understanding that effective communication required more than just physical capability. Young men selected for the service underwent years of preparation that included not only physical conditioning, but also instruction in the cultural protocols and administrative procedures that governed imperial communication. They learned to distinguish between different types of messages, to prioritize urgent communications, and to maintain the security protocols that protected sensitive information. The peaceful concentration required for this training, conducted in mountain communities where the rhythm of daily life naturally supported contemplative learning, created a cadre of professionals whose reliability became legendary. The relationship between a Charles Keen network and the broader imperial economy reveals the sophisticated understanding of information as a resource that characterized Inca administration. Economic decisions made in Cusco regarding tribute collection, labor allocation, or resource distribution required timely communication with provincial administrators who possessed detailed local knowledge. The flow of Quipu records through the Charles Keen network enabled a level of economic coordination that would have been impossible without this human information infrastructure. Provincial administrators could report crop yields, population changes, or resource needs with confidence that their communications would reach central authorities quickly and accurately. The seasonal rhythms that governed Andean life also influenced the operation of the Charles Keen network, creating a communication system that breathed with the natural cycles of the mountain environment. During harvest seasons, when agricultural communities required intensive coordination, the network carried increased volumes of administrative traffic. During the quieter months, when communities focused on craft production and infrastructure maintenance, the runners might carry different types of information, including requests for skilled artisans or reports on construction projects. This flexibility within structure exemplified the Inca genius for creating systems that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential function. The tragic loss of Charles Keen Knowledge following the Spanish conquest represents one of history's great examples of institutional amnesia. The network that had efficiently served millions of people for centuries disappeared within a generation, its sophisticated protocols and training methods lost as the colonial administration imposed different communication systems. Modern attempts to understand the full complexity of the Charles Keen network rely on archaeological evidence, Spanish colonial accounts, and the fragmentary memories preserved in indigenous communities, creating a picture that is necessarily incomplete, but nonetheless reveals the remarkable achievement of this pre-Columbian communication system. The sacred economy of the Inca Empire reveals itself most clearly in the gentle rhythms of tribute and redistribution, where the fundamental principle of reciprocity expanded from village A, LLU, to encompass millions of subjects across the Andes. Unlike the monetary systems developing in distant continents, the Inca tribute system operated on the profound understanding that labor, rather than goods, represented the truest measure of human contribution to collective well-being. In the quiet administrative centers scattered throughout the empire, Quipu keepers maintained meticulous records of each community's labor obligations. Their colored, not encoding not merely numbers, but the sacred relationships that bound society together. The tribute system they documented was based on the ancient concept of ani reciprocal obligation, elevated to imperial scale, while maintaining its essential character as mutual support rather than exploitation. Each ALLU contributed according to its capacity and received according to its needs, with surplus production flowing upward through administrative networks to support the empire's broader functions. The Quipu records reveal a sophisticated understanding of regional variations, seasonal fluctuations, and community capabilities that allowed tribute obligations to be adjusted with remarkable flexibility. A highland community might contribute primarily through textile production and potato cultivation, while coastal settlements offered fish and cotton, their diverse contributions carefully balanced against their particular circumstances and resources. The redistribution ceremonies that punctuated the agricultural calendar transform to economic obligation, Inca's sacred ritual, where the Inca's role as provider became manifest through the generous distribution of stored goods during times of scarcity. These gatherings, held in the great plazas of administrative centers, created peaceful scenes of community celebration where the abstract mathematics of Quipu records transformed into tangible expressions of imperial care for subject populations. Spanish chroniclers marveled at the efficiency of these redistribution networks, observing how goods flowed seamlessly from imperial storehouses to communities facing crop failures or natural disasters. The QOLLQA storage system, with its strategic placement along communication routes, enabled rapid response to regional needs while maintaining the careful balance between local autonomy and imperial coordination that characterized Inca administration. The sacred dimension of this economic system extended beyond mere resource management to encompass the spiritual relationships that bound communities to their land and to each other. Tribute collection was accompanied by ritual offerings to mountain spirits and agricultural deities, acknowledging that human economic activity existed within larger cosmic cycles of reciprocity. The Quipu keepers who recorded these transactions understood their work as maintaining not just administrative records, but the sacred mathematics that preserved harmony between human society and the natural world. Regional variations in tribute obligations reflected the empire's remarkable ability to adapt standardized systems to local conditions while maintaining overall coherence. Highland communities contributed different goods and services than their lowland counterparts, but the underlying principle of reciprocal obligation remained constant. This flexibility, encoded in the subtle variations of Quipu construction and interpretation, allowed the empire to encompass extraordinary cultural and ecological diversity while maintaining unified administration. The integration of tribute collection with religious festivals created natural rhythms that synchronized economic activity with agricultural cycles and community celebrations. Harvest festivals became occasions for tribute presentation, where communities proudly displayed their contributions while receiving reciprocal gifts that demonstrated the empire's commitment to their welfare. These peaceful gatherings reinforced social bonds while fulfilling administrative functions, creating a seamless integration of economic and spiritual life. The tragic loss of Quipu reading knowledge following Spanish conquest represents more than the disappearance of an information system. It marks the severing of connections between communities and the sacred principles that govern their economic relationships. Modern indigenous communities throughout the Andes continue to practice forms of reciprocal obligation that echo these ancient patterns, suggesting that the fundamental wisdom of the tribute and redistribution system transcends its specific historical manifestation. The contemplative nature of this economic system, with its emphasis on balance, reciprocity, and community welfare, offers profound lessons for contemporary resource management challenges. The peaceful efficiency of Inca redistribution networks, operating without monetary exchange or market mechanisms, demonstrates alternative approaches to organizing human economic activity that prioritize collective well-being over individual accumulation. As we reflect on the gentle wisdom embedded in these ancient systems, we glimpse the possibility of economic organization based on reciprocity rather than competition, where the careful maintenance of community relationships creates abundance for all participants. The Quipu keepers who preserved these records understood that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in the patient cultivation of relationships that sustained life across generations. Their knotted records encoding a vision of human society living in harmony with itself and its environment. As we reach the gentle conclusion of our contemplative journey through the sophisticated world of Inca resource management, we find ourselves surrounded by the quiet wisdom of knotted records and the peaceful efficiency of mountain administration. The Quipu system, with its elegant mathematics encoded in colored threads, represents something profoundly beautiful about human organization, the ability to create complex, nurturing systems that serve millions while maintaining the intimate, tactile connection between administrator and community. In the high Andean valleys where these remarkable systems once flourished, we can almost hear the soft whisper of fingers reading knots, the gentle murmur of administrators discussing resource allocation, and the peaceful rhythm of seasonal cycles that govern both agricultural work and imperial planning. The Khipukamayuq, those contemplative keepers of knotted knowledge, worked with the same meditative focus that we might bring to our own moments of quiet reflection, their fingers moving along colored cords, with the practiced grace of musicians reading an ancient, three-dimensional score. The ALOU kinship networks that formed the foundation of this system remind us that the most effective economic organization often grows from the most fundamental human bonds: family, reciprocity, and mutual care. These gentle webs of obligation and support, stretching across mountain valleys and connecting communities through shared labor and seasonal celebration, created a foundation of trust that allowed the larger imperial systems to function with remarkable efficiency and humanity. As we imagine the terraced mountainsides where this vertical economy flourished, we can picture the morning mist rising from irrigation channels, the peaceful sound of water flowing through stone conduits, and the methodical work of farmers moving across different elevation zones like a slow, agricultural dance. The QOLQA storage chambers, built into hillsides and filled with carefully preserved provisions, speak to a deep understanding of security and planning, a brought comfort to entire populations. The mitre labor system, with its careful balance of community service and agricultural cycles, demonstrates how public works can emerge from collective care rather than coercion. We can envision the quiet satisfaction of workers returning to their communities after contributing to roads and bridges that would serve generations, their labor woven into the fabric of imperial infrastructure with the same careful attention that characterized the knotted records themselves. The Chazki messenger networks, carrying precious information along mountain paths, remind us of the vital importance of communication in maintaining human connections across vast distances. These swift runners, moving like thoughts through the nervous system of empire, carried not just administrative data, but the very pulse of community life, ensuring that distant valleys remained connected to the larger rhythm of imperial coordination. In the tribute and redistribution systems, we see the beautiful paradox of imperial organization that remained rooted in reciprocity and mutual obligation. The ceremonial presentation of tribute and the careful redistribution of resources created a sacred economy where abundance flowed like mountain streams, nourishing communities while maintaining the delicate balance between local autonomy and imperial unity. As we reflect on these remarkable achievements, we can feel a deep sense of peace in knowing that human beings have always found ways to organize themselves with wisdom, efficiency, and care. The Quipu system, with its elegant solution to the challenge of record-keeping without writing, represents a profound alternative to our modern approaches. One that maintain the tactile, personal connection between administrator and data, between decision-maker and community. The tragic loss of Quipu reading knowledge reminds us gently of the fragility of human systems and the importance of preserving indigenous wisdom. Yet in the surviving knotted records, hanging quietly in museums and archives, we can still sense the presence of those patient administrators who once read meaning in every knot, who understood that true organization comes not from rigid control, but from flexible responsiveness to human needs. Let yourself sink now into the peaceful rhythm of this ancient wisdom, feeling the gentle weight of knotted cords in your hands, the soft texture of alpaca wool dyed in earth tones. Imagine yourself in a quiet stone chamber high in the Andes, surrounded by the careful records of a civilization that understood how to nurture millions while maintaining the intimate scale of human care. Feel the mountain air flowing gently through your lungs, carrying with it the wisdom of systems that honored both efficiency and humanity, both imperial coordination and local autonomy. Let the peaceful efficiency of these ancient administrators wash over you like morning mist in an Andean valley, their quiet competence and meditative focus becoming your own as you drift into the restful sleep of those who have glimpsed the profound beauty of human organization at its most wise and gentle. In this state of peaceful understanding, rest now in the knowledge that the wisdom of the Quipu keepers continues to whisper through the mountain valleys, their knotted records holding secrets of organization and care that speak to the eternal human capacity for creating systems that serve both the individual and the community with equal grace and profound, lasting peace.